Last Thursday, I sat alone in my office on the 22nd floor of a glass building in Seattle while my phone vibrated nonstop against the desk. 31 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 9 text messages. All from family members who hadn't spoken to me in almost 8 years. Not one message asked how I was, not one said, "We miss you." Every single one wanted the same thing: money. Funny how people suddenly remember your existence the second they think you might be useful again. But before I tell you why they called me after nearly a decade of silence, you need to understand the kind of family I came from. Because families like mine don't destroy you loudly at first, they do it slowly, quietly, one holiday dinner at a time. Before we get into it, subscribe and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if you've ever been treated like the problem child simply because you stopped staying quiet, this story is for you. My name is Selena Lawson. I'm 30 years old. And for most of my life, my family treated me like an inconvenience they were forced to tolerate publicly. My hometown was Ridgewood, Ohio. Population, tiny enough that everybody knew your business before you did. The kind of place where church gossip spread faster than weather warnings. Where people smiled politely while dissecting your life behind closed doors. And in Ridgewood, my mother ruled every room she entered. Diane Lawson. Beautiful in that cold, intimidating way that made people straighten their posture around her. She volunteered at church, organized charity dinners, chaired community fundraisers. Everyone called her generous, elegant, devoted, at home. She treated love like something children had to earn, especially me. My younger sister Meredith was the golden child, smart, polished, photogenic. The kind of daughter my mother displayed proudly like a trophy. Meredith got praise before she even accomplished things. I got criticism before I even spoke. "Why can't you dress more like your sister?" Meredith never argues. "Why are you always so emotional?" Funny thing about scapegoat children. Eventually, you stop defending yourself because nobody listens anyway. By 23, I worked 2 jobs, waitressing nights at Rosario's Italian Grill, receptionist shifts during the day at a small real estate office downtown. I barely slept, but I saved every dollar carefully because I had one plan: leave Ridgewood forever. Not dramatically, not rebelliously, quietly, like escaping a burning building without alerting anyone inside. Then Thanksgiving 2019 happened. The night everything finally broke beyond repair. My parents hosted 30 relatives that year. The dining room smelled like turkey, cinnamon candles, and expensive wine my father poured too heavily whenever tension filled the room. Which was often. Mom stood at the head of the table making her annual toast while everyone smiled up at her admiringly. "To Meredith," she announced warmly, lifting her glass. "For another incredible year making this family proud." Everyone clapped. Meredith smiled modestly beside her boyfriend. I sat 3 seats away holding my wineglass silently. Nobody asked how my year went. Nobody ever did. Not my classes, not my savings, not my plans to leave town. I had become background noise in my own family. But that night I came to dinner carrying one question, just one. After dessert, while people scraped pie crust from plates and conversations softened into overlapping chatter, I looked toward my mother carefully. "Mom," I asked quietly, "is there still money left in Grandma Ruth's education fund?" The room changed instantly. You know that feeling when a conversation dies so fast it almost makes your skin cold? That. My mother lowered her coffee cup slowly. 15 relatives suddenly looked everywhere except directly at me. And deep down, I already knew something was wrong. Grandma Ruth had promised both Meredith and me separate education accounts before she died, $12,000 each. She told me herself 2 years earlier while sitting at her kitchen table holding my hands. "This money is for your future," she whispered. "Nobody can touch it but you." Apparently, somebody touched it anyway. My mother smiled at me across the Thanksgiving table, not a warm smile, the dangerous kind. The kind she used right before rewriting reality in front of an audience. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, "not this again." Again. Interesting word considering I had never asked about the fund before in my life. I sat up straighter slowly. "What do you mean?" Mom exchanged one quick glance with my Aunt Patricia. Tiny, fast, but enough. The kind of look adults share when they already know the truth and are silently deciding how much damage control is necessary. Then Diane Lawson sighed dramatically and addressed the entire table instead of me. You see what I've been dealing with lately? There it was. The performance. My stomach tightened immediately, because suddenly I wasn't asking about money anymore. I was becoming the problem, again. My Aunt Deborah leaned forward sympathetically. Selena, honey, that tone. God, I hated that tone. The one people use when they've already decided you're unstable before hearing a single word. I'm just asking about Grandma's fund, I said carefully. Mom tilted her head. You've been so emotional lately. And just like that, the conversation shifted completely away from the missing money. Classic Diane, never deny directly, redirect emotionally. I looked around the table desperately. My father sat staring into his wineglass. Silent, always silent. My brother Kyle scrolled through his phone pretending not to hear. Meredith avoided eye contact entirely. 15 people in that room, not one asked. What happened to Selena's money? Not one. I suddenly understood something terrifying. They already knew. I excused myself quietly before my voice shook and carried dessert plates into the kitchen because apparently humiliation doesn't exempt you from cleanup duties in families like mine. The faucet ran loudly while I washed dishes nobody offered to help with. Muscle memory. I had spent my whole life cleaning up emotional messes other people created. Then I heard my mother's voice drift through the doorway. Low, careless. She didn't need the fund anyway. I froze instantly. Aunt Patricia whispered something too quietly to hear. Mom continued. Meredith's sorority fees were expensive, then there was the car situation. Besides, Selena wasn't exactly going anywhere. My hands stopped moving completely beneath the running water. The room tilted sideways. She used it. She actually used it. $12,000 my grandmother left specifically for me gone, spent on Meredith. And the worst part, nobody sounded shocked, meaning everyone already knew. I turned the faucet off slowly. Every sound in the kitchen disappeared. No clattering dishes, no family laughter, nothing, just this enormous roaring silence inside my head. Then another memory surfaced suddenly. Grandma Ruth squeezing my hands across her kitchen table. Nobody can touch it but you. She trusted my mother, that was the mistake. I walked back into the dining room carefully. Mom was pouring herself more wine. Perfect posture, perfect smile, perfect community church lady performance. That money was mine, I said quietly. The entire room went silent again. Mom didn't even flinch. You're being dramatic. Dramatic, the favorite word of emotionally manipulative people everywhere. You stole money Grandma left for me? Gasps around the table, not because I was wrong, because I said it out loud. Mom folded her napkin calmly. See, she said gently to the relatives. This is exactly what I've been worried about. Worried, not guilty, not defensive, concerned, like I was mentally unstable instead of betrayed. I stared at her in disbelief. How are you making this about me? Her expression softened artificially. Selena, sweetheart, maybe this isn't the best time. There's something uniquely horrifying about watching someone manipulate an entire room in real time, especially when they've practiced on you your whole life. I looked toward my father desperately. Dad, he finally lifted his eyes from the table, then quietly said the sentence that ended my relationship with him forever. Let's not ruin Thanksgiving. That was it. Not your mother shouldn't have taken the money, not we'll figure this out, just don't make everyone uncomfortable. My chest physically hurt, because suddenly I understood the truth. Keeping peace mattered more to my father than protecting me ever would. Mom dabbed the corner of her eye dramatically with a napkin. I've tried so hard with her, she whispered to the table. And just like that, I became the unstable daughter ruining Thanksgiving instead of the girl whose inheritance had been stolen. I looked around the room one last time. 15 relatives, 15 witnesses, not one person on my side. That was the exact moment something inside me finally broke. Not loudly, quietly, permanently. 10 minutes later, my mother called everyone into the living room. I knew exactly what was happening before she even opened her mouth. Because this wasn't new, families like mine repeat the same emotional choreography for years. One person confronts the truth. Another person turns them into the problem. And everybody else sits quietly because silence feels safer than honesty. The Lawson family had perfected this routine long before I was old enough to understand it. I stood near the staircase while relatives squeezed onto couches holding coffee cups and pie plates like audience members waiting for a performance. My mother remained standing. Of course she did. Diane Lawson never sat during scenes she intended to control. "I've tried to keep this private," she began softly. There it was, the martyr voice. Instantly everyone looked at me with concern. Not concern for me, concern about me. Mom pressed one hand dramatically against her chest. "But Selena has been struggling lately." I felt my stomach drop. No, she wasn't actually doing this. "She's been having emotional episodes," Mom continued sadly. I didn't want to embarrass her publicly, but after tonight, she let the sentence trail off carefully. Smart. Manipulative people understand that incomplete sentences allow audiences to invent worse conclusions themselves. Aunt Deborah nodded sympathetically immediately. "Oh, Diane," I looked toward my father again, still silent. Hands folded tightly between his knees while he stared at the carpet like avoiding eye contact made him innocent. Cowardice disguised as neutrality. Kyle leaned against the wall, scrolling his phone. Meredith whispered something to her boyfriend and shook her head sadly like I was exhausting. Nobody defended me, not one person. I suddenly felt completely outside my own life, like I was watching a room full of strangers discuss someone they already decided was unstable. "This isn't true," I said quietly. Mom's eyes filled instantly with fake tears. "Sweetheart, nobody's attacking you." God, that sentence. The favorite weapon of people actively attacking you. I felt heat crawling up my neck. Humiliation, rage, grief all at once. Then Aunt Patricia finally spoke for the first time all evening. Softly, hesitantly, "Maybe we should discuss this privately." Mom turned toward her sister immediately, sharp smile, controlled. "There's nothing shameful about mental health struggles." There it was again, public concern performance. She wanted witnesses. That's what shattered me most. Not the stolen money, not even the lies. The fact that my own mother needed an audience. I looked around the room slowly. Every relative avoided direct eye contact now because deep down they knew, not the whole truth maybe, but enough. Enough to recognize discomfort. Enough to stay quiet anyway. I suddenly realized something devastating. If I stayed here any longer, this story would become permanent. Ridgewood would always remember me as unstable because Diane Lawson decided that narrative protected her reputation best. And nobody in this town would ever question her version first. I walked upstairs without another word. Nobody followed me, not even my father. That hurt more than everything else somehow. I packed one suitcase mechanically. Jeans, sweaters. My winter coat, toothbrush, phone charger, the basics. My hands shook the entire time, not because I doubted leaving, because deep down I knew I wasn't coming back. Then my eyes landed on the small wooden box sitting on my dresser. Grandma Ruth's box. She gave it to me 2 years before she died. "Open this when you really need courage," she'd whispered. I never opened it, because opening it felt too final somehow, like admitting she was actually gone. I grabbed the box carefully and slid it into my suitcase. Then I counted my cash, $218, that was everything I had. 23 years old, 2 jobs, no degree yet, no support system, no plan. But staying suddenly felt more dangerous than leaving. When I walked downstairs carrying my suitcase, conversations stopped instantly. My mother stood near the fireplace holding a wineglass. Perfect posture, perfect expression. Perfect victim. "If you walk out that door," she said calmly, "don't bother coming back." I waited for my father to say something, anything, stop her, wait, call me tomorrow. Nothing, he stayed silent again. That silence followed me longer than my mother's cruelty ever did. I opened the front door. Cold November air rushed inside immediately. Snow covered the sidewalks outside in thin white layers. I stepped onto the porch carrying one suitcase and a wooden box from my grandmother. Then I heard Mom's final words behind me. "You're doing this to yourself, Selena." No, that was the terrifying part. I finally realized I wasn't. I bought a Greyhound ticket 40 minutes later. The furthest destination my money could afford was Portland, Oregon. I had never been there before, didn't know a single person there, couldn't even point to it confidently on a map. But the bus left at 2:15 a.m. and honestly, that felt like enough of a plan. The station smelled like burnt coffee, wet coats, and exhaustion. I sat alone beneath fluorescent lights, clutching Grandma Ruth's wooden box on my lap while snow drifted outside the windows. Nobody called me, not my father, not Meredith, not even Kyle, and that silence told me everything. Families like mine only chase you when your absence inconveniences them. At 2:10, I boarded the bus with one suitcase, $200, and a life that had just exploded quietly behind me. The ride to Portland took nearly 2 days. Cornfields became highways. Highways became mountains. Mountains became endless rain. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice again. She's been having episodes. Funny how easily emotionally abusive people weaponize concern. The woman sitting beside me for part of the trip was heading to Boise to visit her grandchildren. Around Nebraska, she offered me half a turkey sandwich wrapped in foil. I realized then I hadn't eaten since Thanksgiving dinner. "Thank you," I whispered. She nodded kindly and looked back out the window without asking questions. That small kindness nearly broke me emotionally, because strangers had shown me more gentleness in 10 seconds than my own family had in years. Portland greeted me with freezing rain and gray skies. Perfect movie atmosphere for a breakdown. My first night there, I stayed in a women's shelter near Burnside. Second week, a hostel that smelled like bleach, ramen noodles, and hopelessness. I shared a room with 4 strangers and slept with my suitcase pressed against the bed because I was terrified someone would steal the only things I still owned. I applied for every job I could find: receptionist, server, office assistant, dog walker, anything. Finally, 2 weeks later, a small consulting firm downtown hired me as a receptionist. Hale and Associates, 8 employees. Tiny office, 3rd floor of an old warehouse building. The owner, Margaret Hale, interviewed me personally. Sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of woman who noticed details quietly. "You've had a lot of jobs," she observed while scanning my resume. "I work hard," I answered carefully. Margaret looked at me for a long second, then nodded once. "Good, we need that. No pity, no invasive questions, just opportunity." That job saved my life, not dramatically. Gradually, which honestly matters more, I answered phones, sorted files, made coffee, stayed late without complaint because after surviving Diane Lawson, normal workplace stress felt almost peaceful. 3 weeks into my new life, I made a mistake. I checked Facebook. Mom had posted a long emotional message in the family group. "Please pray for Selena. She's going through a difficult time right now and we just hope she gets the help she needs." Hundreds of comments flooded underneath. "Praying for your family. You're such a strong mother. Mental illness is heartbreaking." Then Kyle commented, "She always was the dramatic one." 47 likes. I stared at that screen for nearly a minute. Not because I was surprised, because suddenly I understood something horrifying. They weren't just abandoning me privately. They were building a public story about me, a permanent one: the unstable daughter, the difficult child, the family disappointment. And back in Ridgewood, people believed them. I deleted Facebook that night and never returned. Here's what nobody tells you about cutting off toxic family when you're young and broke: freedom is expensive. No emergency contacts, no safety net, no one to call when you get sick, no one celebrating birthdays, no home to return to during hard seasons. At 23, I caught the flu so badly one winter I couldn't get off my apartment floor for nearly a day. I remember staring at my phone wondering who I'd even call if things got worse. Nobody came to mind. That realization changes a person, but slowly life started becoming mine for the first time ever. No criticism over breakfast, no emotional landmines during holidays, no constant feeling that I was failing some invisible test. One morning, I woke up in my tiny Portland apartment and realized something strange. The voice in my head had gotten quieter. You know the one, the cruel voice abusive families install inside you early. "You're too emotional, too sensitive, too dramatic, too difficult." That voice suddenly wasn't as loud anymore. And for the first time in my entire life, I started wondering who I might become without it. Margaret Hale noticed me before I noticed myself. That's the strange thing about healthy people. They see effort without needing it announced. 3 months after I started at Hale and Associates, I stayed late reorganizing client files nobody else could find efficiently. Years of chaos. Misplaced paperwork, incorrect labels, duplicate folders. Honestly, fixing systems calmed me, probably because my childhood trained me to anticipate problems before they exploded. The next morning, Margaret stopped beside my desk holding one of the reorganized binders. "You did all this?" I nodded carefully. Things were difficult to track. She flipped through color-coded tabs silently, then looked up at me. You weren't asked to do this. No, a pause. Why did you? The honest answer. Because useful people survive longer, but instead I said, I like fixing broken things. Margaret studied me for several long seconds, not judgmentally, curiously. Then she pulled up a chair beside my desk. Tell me what else you think is broken around here. That sentence changed my life, not dramatically all at once, but quietly, like somebody unlocking a door I didn't realize existed. Within 6 months, Margaret moved me from receptionist duties into project coordination, then grant administration, then budget review. Every time I solved a problem, she handed me another one slightly bigger. And for the first time in my life, someone rewarded competence instead of exploiting it. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, my family continued telling their version of me. I learned this years later through Aunt Patricia. According to my mother, I was supposedly receiving treatment. Nobody asked where, nobody verified anything. In towns like Ridgewood, people prefer comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths, especially when the liar brings casseroles to church potlucks. Mom transformed herself into the grieving mother of a troubled daughter, and apparently people loved that story. Back in Portland, survival slowly became stability. I enrolled in online business classes through Portland State, worked during the day, studied at night, ate the same cheap meals constantly because tuition mattered more than comfort. Rice, pasta, discount groceries, secondhand clothes. No vacations, no dating, no safety net, just work every single day. And honestly, I loved it because every exhausted step belonged to me, no manipulation attached, no guilt, no emotional debt, just progress. One night around 2 a.m, I sat at my tiny kitchen table staring at accounting homework while rain hammered the windows outside. I remember suddenly realizing something strange. Nobody was yelling. Nobody was criticizing me. Nobody was mocking my ambitions. The silence felt peaceful instead of tense. That's when I understood how deeply chaos had shaped my nervous system. Healthy environments felt unfamiliar at first, almost suspicious. Then came year 3. The year everything started changing fast. I caught a billing error in a development grant that would have cost one of our clients nearly $6,000. Margaret called me into her office immediately afterward. You double-check the financial projections yourself? I always double-check everything. Again, that survival instinct. Children raised in emotionally unstable homes become hyper-observant adults. Mistakes used to cost me emotionally, so now I caught them before they happened. Margaret leaned back slowly. You should be managing projects. I laughed awkwardly. I'm still finishing school. So, that simple word stunned me. She shrugged sadly. Easier than telling church friends their daughter was gay. God, that moment cracked something open inside me, because suddenly I understood something life-changing. Families like ours survive through narrative control. Somebody becomes the disappointment, the unstable one, the selfish one, the shameful one, and everybody else protects the story because questioning it threatens the entire system. Jess reached across the table and squeezed my hand lightly. You know what scares people like your mother most? What? She smiled faintly. Evidence you were never the problem. 5 years after I left Ridgewood, Ohio, I became Chief Operations Director at Northspire Development Group in Seattle. Even writing that sentence still feels surreal sometimes. Not because the title sounded impressive, because nobody in my family ever imagined I'd become anything without them, especially my mother. Diane Lawson built her identity around being needed. The second I survived without her, the entire illusion cracked. Northspire specialized in urban redevelopment projects across the Pacific Northwest. Affordable housing, community grants, city partnerships, complicated work, the kind that required organization, precision, and emotional endurance. Funny enough, my childhood prepared me perfectly. Managing narcissistic family dynamics teaches skills nobody puts on resumes. Crisis anticipation, conflict navigation, reading emotional shifts instantly, staying calm under pressure. Trauma disguised itself as professionalism remarkably well. By 30, I owned a condo overlooking Elliott Bay. Nothing extravagant, but peaceful, floor-to-ceiling windows, bookshelves everywhere. Plants I somehow kept alive despite constant travel. A kitchen nobody criticized. A home nobody weaponized against me. And most importantly, silence that felt safe. Margaret retired 2 years earlier and hugged me during her farewell dinner. You were always meant for more than survival, she whispered. That sentence stayed with me for months afterward. Because survival had been my entire identity for so long that success still felt temporary sometimes. Like someone might eventually discover I didn't belong here. Then came the email. Subject line: RIDGEWOOD Community Foundation speaking invitation. I almost deleted it instantly. Then I saw the details. The Ridgewood Women in Leadership fundraiser needed a keynote speaker for their annual charity gala. And apparently, someone recommended me after a business magazine featured Northspire's housing initiative. I stared at the invitation for nearly 5 minutes. Because suddenly, the town I escaped with one suitcase wanted me back on stage under bright lights. Life has a twisted sense of humor sometimes. Jess nearly spit out her coffee laughing when I showed her the email. You have to go. Absolutely not. Selena, no, she leaned across my kitchen counter grinning. This is cinematic level karma. I shook my head immediately. I'm not interested in revenge. Jess laughed harder. That's exactly why you should go. God, I hated when she made sense. For 3 nights, I barely slept. Every memory came flooding back. Thanksgiving, the smear campaign, the silence, walking through snow alone carrying a suitcase, and underneath all that, fear, because no matter how successful you become, some part of you still remembers who hurt you first. Finally, on the 4th morning, I accepted the invitation. Not for revenge, not even for closure. Honestly, I think I just needed proof that Ridgewood no longer owned me emotionally. The gala took place in late October. 7 years after I left, 7 years without seeing my mother face to face. The second my rental car crossed the Ridgewood City sign, my chest tightened automatically. Trauma lives in the body long after logic catches up. Nothing looked different. Same church banners, same diners, same carefully trimmed lawns, same town frozen in polite appearances. I checked into the hotel quietly Friday afternoon. The fundraiser wasn't until Saturday evening, but apparently small towns have supernatural powers when it comes to gossip. Because by dinner time, people already knew I was back. My phone buzzed around 8 o'clock with a number I didn't recognize. Ohio area code. I stared at it silently, then answered. Hello, silence for 2 seconds, then my mother's voice. Selena, God. Some voices instantly turn you into younger versions of yourself. I hated that. Hi, Mom. She exhaled shakily like she was emotional already. We heard you're in town. Interesting. Always collective language when accountability gets uncomfortable. Yes. A pause, then, you should have called. I almost laughed. 7 years, not one birthday card, not one apology, not one attempt to tell the truth. But somehow I was still the rude one. I've been busy. Mom ignored that completely. We'd love to see you before the fundraiser tomorrow. We'd love to see you, not I'm sorry, not can we talk, straight to pretending normalcy existed. Classic Diane, I don't think that's a good idea. Silence. Then her tone shifted slightly colder. You know people still ask about you. There it was, image management. Even now, I closed my eyes briefly. What do you tell them? Mom hesitated too long, and suddenly I already knew the answer before she spoke. We say you needed space. Needed space, not we stole from her, not we lied about her mental health, not we drove her out of town, just space. A softer lie, more socially acceptable. My grip tightened around the phone, then quietly, calmly, I asked the question she feared most. Mom, do you even remember what you did to me? The line went completely silent after I asked the question. Not defensive silence, not angry silence. The kind people fall into when they realize the script they prepared suddenly isn't working anymore. Finally, Mom laughed softly. Uncomfortable? You always exaggerate things. There it was, 7 years later, and she still couldn't admit reality out loud. I stared out my hotel window at the Ridgewood courthouse glowing beneath streetlights while old anger moved quietly through my chest. Not explosive anymore, just tired. You stole Grandma's money, I said calmly. Mom sighed immediately. That money helped the family. The family. Interesting how family always seemed to mean everyone except me. It was mine. You weren't using it. God, there it was again. The entitlement. The casual rewriting of harm into practicality. Like robbing me became reasonable because she decided Meredith deserved more. Then Mom lowered her voice carefully. You know, Meredith was under a lot of pressure back then. I almost laughed out loud. Of course, even now the golden child required protection first. Not once during that conversation did Mom ask what leaving Ridgewood alone at 23 had done to me emotionally. Not once. Because narcissistic parents don't experience your pain as real unless it inconveniences them directly. I'm not doing this tonight, I said quietly. Selena, no, that word shocked both of us. I heard it in the silence afterward, because growing up I almost never said no to my mother directly. Boundaries feel violent the first time you use them against controlling people. Mom's voice sharpened slightly. You know your father's health hasn't been good. There it was, guilt, the emergency emotional exit route. I closed my eyes briefly. What happened? He's had heart issues. My chest tightened automatically despite everything, because even after all the damage, part of me still loved my father. Or maybe I loved the version of him I spent years wishing existed. I'm sorry to hear that, I answered carefully. Mom waited, probably expecting immediate reconciliation, concern, submission. Instead, I stayed quiet. And for the first time in my life, she had nowhere to move emotionally, no buttons left to press. Finally, she spoke again. You've changed. I looked out at the dark Ohio streets below. Yes, I said softly. I have. Then I hung up. My hands shook afterward, not because I regretted it, because healing is strange. People think growth feels powerful all the time. Sometimes it just feels sad. Saturday evening arrived cold and windy. The fundraiser took place at Ridgewood Country Club, same ballroom where my senior prom happened. Same chandeliers, same polished marble floors, same wealthy donors pretending appearances equal morality. The event coordinator greeted me nervously near backstage. Miss Lawson, we're so honored you came. Honored. Funny word considering this town once swallowed my mother's lies without hesitation. I stood near the curtains listening to muffled conversations inside the ballroom while adjusting the sleeves of my black dress. Then I heard my name. She looks incredible now. I turned slightly. Two women near the entrance whispered while pretending not to stare. Didn't Diane say she was unstable? The other woman lowered her voice. That's what everyone thought. Thought past tense. Interesting. Suddenly I understood something important. Success changes how people reinterpret your suffering. The same town that once accepted my mother's narrative now questioned it because my life no longer matched the role she assigned me. That realization felt both satisfying and heartbreaking. Then I saw them. My parents entered the ballroom slowly together. Dad looked older, smaller somehow, gray around the temples, tired. Mom still moved like someone performing confidence professionally. Elegant dress, perfect posture, perfect smile. But the second her eyes found me across the room, something flickered. Fear maybe, or recognition. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't standing beneath her anymore. Meredith walked behind them carrying designer heels in one hand while complaining quietly into her phone. Some things never change. And suddenly, I didn't hate them. That surprised me most. I just saw them clearly. Flawed people who built an entire family structure around comfort, favoritism, and denial because truth required too much accountability. The event host stepped onto stage then. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker. Applause filled the ballroom. I took one slow breath, then walked into the light. And for the first time in Ridgewood history, my mother couldn't control the story anymore. The applause echoed through the ballroom as I walked toward the stage. Not polite applause, real applause. The kind people give when they genuinely admire someone. And honestly, that sound almost hurt. Because little pieces of me still remembered what it felt like to beg for approval from people who only offered criticism. The stage lights were warm against my face. Rows of round tables stretched across the ballroom filled with donors, business owners, church leaders, and community figures who once knew me only as Diane Lawson's difficult daughter. Now they studied me differently, curiously, respectfully, amazing what success does to perception. I adjusted the microphone slowly and looked across the crowd. Then my eyes found my mother instantly. Of course they did. Diane sat perfectly composed beside my father near the center table. Elegant smile, hands folded gracefully, but I noticed something most people wouldn't. Her jaw was tight. Because she had spent years controlling the narrative about me. And tonight, that narrative belonged to me, "Thank you for inviting me home," I began calmly. The word home felt strange in my mouth, like trying on clothes that no longer fit. I left Ridgewood 7 years ago with one suitcase, no degree, and absolutely no idea what my life would become. The room went completely still. No one expected honesty that quickly. People in towns like this prefer polished speeches, safe ones. I glanced toward my father briefly. He looked down immediately. "I used to believe successful people were simply more confident than everyone else," I continued. "But I've learned something different." A pause. "Most successful people are just survivors who finally stopped believing the worst things said about them." Silence filled the ballroom, heavy silence. The kind where people start privately connecting your words to things they've heard before. I saw Mom shift slightly in her chair. Good, not revenge, recognition. Different thing entirely. "I know what it feels like," I continued carefully, "to become the family scapegoat. The difficult one, the emotional one, the disappointment." Nobody moved. Nobody even reached for wine glasses anymore. Because suddenly this wasn't just a leadership speech. It was truth walking into a room that spent years avoiding it. "I also know something important now," I said softly. "When families need one person to carry all the blame, it usually means the system itself is broken." My mother's face changed instantly after that sentence. Not dramatically, tiny shift, but enough. Because she understood exactly what was happening, and for once she couldn't interrupt, couldn't redirect, couldn't call me unstable. There were too many witnesses now. I looked around the ballroom slowly. "Some people spend their whole lives trying to earn love by being useful," I said. "Fixing problems, staying quiet, carrying everyone else emotionally." God, the room felt painfully still. Because apparently I wasn't the only person there who understood that kind of loneliness. Then I smiled slightly. "But eventually you realize something life-changing." I paused deliberately. "Your worth is not determined by how much suffering you can tolerate silently." A woman near the front wiped tears from her eyes immediately, and suddenly I understood why this mattered. Not because my family was listening. Because other people were, people carrying their own invisible stories quietly. I spoke another 15 minutes after that, about rebuilding, about leaving environments that destroy your sense of self, about resilience, about creating chosen family instead of begging toxic people to change. I never once mentioned my mother by name, never exposed the inheritance publicly, never humiliated anyone directly. I didn't need to. Truth has weight even when spoken carefully. By the time I finished, the ballroom erupted into applause loud enough to shake the chandeliers. People stood, actually stood, a standing ovation. I looked toward my parents one last time from the stage. Dad was crying quietly. Mom sat frozen, completely motionless beside him. And Meredith, she looked furious, like my healing somehow embarrassed her personally. Then the event coordinator rushed over, smiling breathlessly. "That was incredible." People immediately surrounded me afterward. Donors, business owners, women thanking me quietly for things they never said aloud before. One older woman squeezed my hands with tears in her eyes. "You made a lot of people feel seen tonight." Seen, God, that word nearly broke me emotionally, because for most of my life I wasn't. An hour later, the ballroom had mostly emptied. Staff cleared champagne glasses while soft jazz drifted through the speakers again. Outside the tall windows, October rain blurred the country club lights into streaks of gold. I stood alone near the back terrace, finally breathing normally again when I heard footsteps behind me. Dad. Of course it was Dad, not Mom. She never approached emotional consequences directly if someone else could do it first. He stopped a few feet away with both hands shoved awkwardly into his coat pockets. For a moment, neither of us spoke, and suddenly he looked so much older than I remembered, not physically, emotionally. Like years of silence had finally started weighing visibly on him. "That was a beautiful speech," he said quietly. I nodded once. "Thank you." Another silence. Then he exhaled shakily. "She shouldn't have taken the money." There it was. 7 years late, but finally there. The truth. My chest tightened unexpectedly, not relief, grief. Because hearing the truth after years of denial doesn't heal you. It just confirms how long you lived without it. I stared out at the rain. "You knew?" Dad looked down immediately. "Yes." God, even after all this time, that single word still hurt. Not because he betrayed me, because he watched it happen and stayed quiet. There was always some reason, he whispered. Your mother said Meredith needed more help, then afterward, things got too far. Too far? Interesting phrase for destroying your daughter's reputation to protect your own. I turned toward him slowly. You let everyone think I was unstable. His face crumpled instantly. I know. No excuses this time, no minimizing, just shame, and honestly, that somehow made this harder. Because anger survives easier against monsters than remorseful people. Dad rubbed one hand across his face exhaustedly. Your mother never thought you'd leave. I laughed softly without humor. That was the problem. He looked confused. She thought I'd stay no matter how badly she treated me. Silence settled heavily between us. Inside the ballroom, staff folded tablecloths quietly while distant laughter echoed from another hallway. Life continuing. People moving on. Dad looked toward me carefully then. She still talks about you constantly. I almost smiled sadly. Not me, I corrected softly. The version of me she created. That landed harder than anything else I'd said all night. Because deep down, he knew it was true. Mom never really understood me. She understood the role I played inside her world. Different thing entirely. Dad stepped closer slowly. I should have protected you. God, there it was. The sentence I waited half my life to hear, and weirdly, it didn't heal anything. Because childhood wounds don't disappear once people finally admit they caused them. Still, hearing it mattered. I swallowed hard. Yes, I whispered. You should have. Dad nodded silently with tears in his eyes. For a long moment, neither of us spoke again. Then he reached into his coat pocket and carefully handed me an envelope. I think this belongs to you. I frowned slightly and opened it. Inside sat a cashier's check, $12,000. The exact amount Grandma Ruth left me. My hands froze instantly. Dad looked ashamed. I should have done this years ago. I stared at the check for several seconds before carefully sliding it back into the envelope. Then I handed it back. Dad blinked in surprise. I don't want it. Selena, that money mattered when I was 23 and alone, I said quietly. Now it's just evidence. He looked devastated hearing that. Good, not because I wanted revenge. Because some truths deserve to feel heavy. I took one slow breath. You know what the saddest part is? Dad looked up. I actually believed there was something wrong with me for years. His eyes filled instantly. Because parents rarely understand the full damage of becoming your child's first bully. I'm sorry, he whispered brokenly. And for the first time, I believed he meant it. But some apologies arrive after the version of you that needed them already disappeared. I stepped back toward the ballroom entrance slowly. Dad looked terrified suddenly. Is this goodbye? I thought about that carefully, then answered honestly. I don't know. Because healing doesn't always end with reconciliation. Sometimes it ends with distance, boundaries, peace. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stop carrying relationships that only survive through your silence. As I walked out into the cold October rain that night, something strange happened. For the first time in nearly a decade, Ridgewood no longer felt like a wound, just a place. A place I survived, a place I outgrew. And somewhere behind me, inside a ballroom full of people finally questioning old stories, my mother lost control of the narrative forever. Before you go, subscribe and comment the moment you realized protecting your peace is more important than protecting toxic family relationships. And remember, the people who fear your voice most are usually the ones who benefited from your silence.